talking to you. You know how many of your kind I've swatted with a newspaper? You're nothing but a smear on the sports page to me, you slimy, gut-sucking intestinal parasite. Eat me! Eat me!
Back in my original Rant video I stated, look at other dinosaur films and then compare them with Jurassic Park. Is the franchise unique when compared to those? Not much. And that's because the sequels actually ignore the reason for why Jurassic Park is unique. After spending some time observing the progress of Jurassic Park 4 and thinking about it, I have a good reason to believe that I now understand why that was the case. This is obviously my own way to view it, but I seriously doubt that Michael Crichton was ever motivated by something called merchandising to create the stories that made him the well-known author that he remains to many generations. I recall the sheer scale of the first movie's advertising campaign and the mountain of produced merchandise. Just like the other fans of my generation, I grew up during those times. The movie used good CGI that was only beginning to establish itself in cinematic format. But I like to believe that what made the first movie so great was that it was an experience not just for children, but for anyone interested about basic yet smart storytelling. The merchandise was never the point of the story, and therefore the movie didn't have one sole purpose to exist, which helped it to come across the different ages. In the nutshell, we were given a basic cautionary tale that warns us about what happens when we treat nature as a toy. That's the problem with people. To many of us, life seems to have the meaning of just a plaything that we think we can use however we please, with no fear of consequence. We are either too dumb to get it, or just don't give a crap even if we do. Jurassic Park is one good example of a story that is aware about itself and what it tries to bring across, while at the same time not trying to be a sole gimmick to succeed. Looking at the franchise as a whole entity, Jurassic Park sadly appears to be given the meaning of a merchandise brand, while forgetting how that basic cautionary tale made it what it is today. I know that not everyone agrees for reasons that I won't delve to, and making claims about the sequels is very technical and difficult to articulate. Let's just say that different people have different ways of seeking entertainment. Even die-hard followers of a brand can have contradicting disagreements over their intellectual property. Nevertheless, I'm going to try and have a go at what exactly I feel makes the follow-ups lack severely. To do so, I will use the concept of pedantry as my means of explaining it. First of all, I'm aware that even the original movie is not perfect and has some gaps in how it presents its characters, as well as part of the motivation for them to do what they do. Expecting perfection from movies only makes the reality of imperfection all the more obvious. Like duh, it is inescapable. But in some ironic way, I actually like the movie for its flaws as much as its strengths. In my way of perceiving it, the park was precisely to the T, as the character of Laura Dern describes it, an automated illusion that cannot be controlled, and only gives a flawed impression of safety to those who attempt to will its power. It all goes down in flames, and the survivors escape with some of their integrity still intact. The heroes of that story didn't play a part in what happened. This is what gives the movie much of its coherent staying power. That's why it is a classic, at least to me. The Lost World. What can I say? This is where things went that crazy. There's still some preaching about nature preservation and the same message about toying with life to make it similar to the rationality of the first film when it comes to ethical questions. The problem is that it only gets halfway there. Do these supposed protagonists really have the balls to claim that these animals are somehow equally natural to, say, elephants and polar bears? Let alone that being a motivation to commit shady acts? Even Ludlow points out the fact that they are engineered. I hate to say it, but the straw man actually made a damn good point. What's ignored here is that the dinosaurs are essentially a design by committee. These things barely survive in our world, and in the novel it is stated that they are actually going extinct thanks to some flaws that the scientists left to their work. It's pretty good story material that gets ignored in the movie thanks to the so-called environmental message that I'm sure won't help real animals from being treated as fancy playthings in a circus. Fact. People are capricious creatures. That is perfectly illustrated by what makes this movie fail as a successful continuation. In the first movie, the protagonists of the story were never responsible for what happened. They were simply the collateral side of the conflict. Whereas in The Lost World, the entire blame for why the shit hits the fan can be placed on our so-called heroes going all reckless for the sake of a flawed ideology. Hell, Vince Vaughn's character could have made a way more novel villain than what Alice Howard's role ever was. All Ludlow does is stand around barking orders as the capitalist scapegoat, while Nick Van Owen nicks some bullets, cuts some fuel lines, and releases potentially dangerous dinosaurs. To add to the injury, the character is never truly blamed for his actions, and pretty much disappears from the film once we get to San Diego. Talk about being a karma Houdini and a pawn. It's such a lazy way to tell a story about the creators of genetically engineered dinosaurs. This movie had nothing to do with its source material, to say the least.
Yet, the epic genre worked its way to us, and we bought the toys. Oh yes.
Jurassic Park 3. Well, let's just say that there was no good excuse to begin with.
Yet, the epic genre worked its way to us, and we bought the toys. We bought the toys. We bought the toys. We bought the toys. Yes.
There's a pattern at work here. The sad thing is that it has no true relation to what made Jurassic Park work as a story to begin with. I'm not claiming that there's something wrong with an occasional purchase of toys. But when as a filmmaking studio your sole motivation appears to be in making something just to have merchandise-compatible content, such content only exists to serve a plating mentality with no other redeeming values. That might be a problem from a cultural standpoint. A product's quality should never be measured in provability, but in its nutritional value. Literally. So here's a good question for all of us. How exactly do we want to be entertained? Have we really waited 13 years just to have another fancy plane session with action figures? Colin Trevorrow was right. We are all directing Jurassic Park 4. And let me tell you folks, that's exactly what scares me.
Eat me! Ah!